Hey, Senda.
Hey, Phil.
Do you want to talk about how the party met?
Yeah, I was late one night in the tavern. There was a guy in the corner. Oh,
No, I meant before that.
Right. Like a prelude?
Oh, cue music. And welcome to another fine episode of Panda Talking Games. I am your host, who is foreshadowing things to come, Phil.
And I am your other host, who is discovering backstory, Senda.
Well, we're here. We're doing a show tonight. I think we've hinted at it, but why don't you tell us where our topic comes from tonight?
Would you say that I have foreshadowed it?
I think the opening foreshadowed it.
Oh, indeed. Well, anyway, good. So the question tonight is, we were asked to talk about how hints. We have.
Oh boy!
How do I translate this into the sentence that I was saying? Let me just try that one more time.
Sure.
So, AD and David on Twitter asked us to talk about hints and strategies on running player preludes before a campaign begins.
Fantastic. That makes complete sense to me. Also, AD and David is that's
pretty awesome.
That's
Twitter
pretty
handle
awesome
right there. Yeah. Bonus points
to the House of David for such a creative Twitter name. I like that. I like preludes. I dig them. I've done them before. You've done a bunch of them. A lot of them. You've done a lot of preludes.
So we're actually going to expand this slightly, because most of the things that I've done with foreshadowing and origin story stuff they've frequently been flashbacks instead of preludes. So we're going to talk about inserting preludes, not necessarily before a campaign. We're going to talk about before campaign and like mid-campaign.
It's fine. We're going to
use it flexibly on that point.
Yeah, we're definitely going to cover David's question, so we'll talk about him in the structure of using it before campaigns, but we will also talk about the alternative structure of dealing with it after the campaign has begun. And and we can talk about, when we get to it, we'll talk about advantages for both. I did not write that in the notes, but we will talk.
We'll talk
about advantages to both, because there are reasons why... you might want to do it before a campaign, and there are reasons why you might want to do it after the campaign's kicked off. Both are valid, but they are two tools in the toolbox.
True. Yep.
All right. So to get started, let's just do a couple quick definitions, right? Prelude by dictionary is an action or event serving as an introduction to something more important. That makes sense.
Yes.
The RPG definition, which is kind of my interpretation of the dictionary definition through gaming terms, is scenes or mini adventures that take place before the start of a story or a campaign. And then again, we'll talk about it in flashback mode about how you can have those scenes be visited later in the campaign by using the flashback tool. Mm-hmm. And if you want a good reference for preludes, I would say that one of the easiest ways to check it out is look at any James Bond movie. The opening of the James Bond movie always opens in a prelude. There's always a thing going on. It's usually in media res. It is usually pretty action-packed. And when it ends, the title credits start. Yep. So... It is a great prelude. It is the kind of the kickoff to the story, so to speak. Yes. I'm a huge fan of them in James Bond movies. They're a lot of fun. It's and from a movie point of view, it's a really nice way to kind of whet your appetite for things to come, because we have like a little bit of action. And then, we have our title sequence, and then we switch into like something a little slower as we kind of build up a narrative. So it's kind of a neat way to do it, and it's become very tropey in James Bond movies. So
I know I have the moment of just like remembering him like falling through the water as the credits play. Like that's the specific glimpse that keeps the vision that keeps jumping into my mind as you're talking about it.
Yep.
Anyway, carry on.
And I mean, we see this, we see this in a lot of different things. If we look at various movies for origin stories and things like that, you kind of see these preludes as different characters kind of, as we switch to different characters, and then like they eventually come together as a group, and then they go do group stuff. So that's kind of what you're doing in your campaign. So it's perfectly fine to kind of model this after some different types of media. And why don't we get into the topic of what can preludes actually do for you? Like, why do a prelude in the first place, right? Like, why not just sit around and kind of talk, sit around and be like, cool, let's talk about how you guys met before we get started. Right. And like, not even like, why play it out? There are some reasons for doing it.
Yeah.
So why don't we start naming some off and talking about them?
Sure. So I think a good one is like warm-ups for players, being like, when you first pick up a character, you created them on paper, right? And maybe you have relationships, and you might have like a whole big backstory. Like you might have spent a long time really thinking about this character, but like until you sit down at the table and open your mouth and interact with other characters at the table, sometimes it's hard to really feel or like get a feel for how this is actually going to play, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes, like, even if you have like a reasonable idea of your character, even voice or attitude or whatever, you also haven't seen the rest of the table yet.
Right.
Right. So, as a warm up, it's a great way to deal with it. Now, it's funny because I think I'm the opposite of you. Like, I don't actually put a lot of thought initially into my characters. I kind of pick one or two grabbable things and go. So preludes are great for me in this respect, because it's like, well, let me warm up on these couple of bits that I've grabbed.
So actually, I think I can go either way with characters, and there really definitely are times that I'm like, well, I know that, for example, this is a one-shot D&D game, and I just need something to kind of grab onto so that I have a thing to play out. And so I'm like, cool, she's going to be like something magic usery, a wizard or whatever, and she's going to be kind of loosely based on the idea of Entrapta, right? Okay, cool. We'll see if anyone notices, right? Like, let's just see how the hell this works at the table. I don't know what I'm doing. Like,
no, I'm definitely guilty of that, right? So I'm definitely guilty of jumping into a character and being like, gruff barbarian?
Sure. Yeah, how does that work?
Right? Which kind of gruff am I? Am I cranky? Am I like old man? Like I've seen it all, kind of annoyed, gruff? Like, I don't know yet. Let's hit the table. Let's find out. So
yeah, let's just see how it plays off of everybody else.
Yeah, so the preludes are great for kind of getting you into your character, right? Like this is your first kind of embodiment of the character, maybe the first time you're kind of getting into your voice or your mindset, those kinds of things. And it's kind of cool to do that before you've like dropped into the middle of a heavy story.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, I mean...
You give me a blank look because She-Ra.
Yes, that's a thing I have to go and watch.
It really, really is. Just saying. Okay. Moving right along. Cool. So hand in hand with you as a player, getting more familiar with how your character is going to play at the table is establishing competency for your character as a character, right?
Yeah.
Meaning, like, it gives you the chance to go in and be like, yes, I am really good at this thing, right? I'm going to go demonstrate my prowess at picking locks for this heist game or whatever it is. Or, like, we're going to zoom in. We're going to zoom in on Phil's character, and he's really focused in, and he's doing this amazing, like, super complicated lock-picking thing on a giant safe. And as the door clicks open, he pops his gum, and then he slides the door open.
I mean, if you want a good example of establishing competency through preludes, look at the beginning of Ocean's 11.
Yes.
Right. Ocean's 11, you meet every character while they're establishing competency.
Yes.
Almost every character. No, I take that back. Every character, I can make an argument for every character is establishing competency when you meet them in the story, right? So like the brothers are racing on the drag strip. Basher is actually cracking a safe when he gets busted and then sprung and all that stuff. So you want what you call it. So establishing competency is cool, right? Because we're often playing protagonists in a story, and you want to like have that. One, the player likes to have that feeling, but two, you kind of also want to show off to the other players, like, this is what my character's about.
This is my thing. This is my deal.
Yeah, this is my niche, or this is my method of dealing with with challenges, that kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very good.
Yeah. So then also, always a good time, right? Like origin stories. So you can do individual origin stories, meaning like we're going to play, this particular character's origin story. Or you can also do group or multiple origin stories. So you can say, so it could be everybody's origin story together, or it could be like these two, their origin story, right?
Yeah. So you can go a couple different ways with this, right? So, for instance, for origin stories, we could do a little bit of in a prelude. We can see the wizard, the first level wizard, finishing up with their master before being sent out into the world, right? We can play out that scene like as the arch wizard is like says like I have taught you enough to get started in this world. I cannot teach you more until you have experienced magic personally. Here's a bag of spell components. Here is a wand. Don't come back until you've researched 3 spells of your own. And send them out. Like, that's a scene we could play. And so what we get to see in that scene is we learn that this character has a mentor. We learn some stuff about the mentor. We learn some stuff about how they learned wizardry. And we kind of learn what their kind of early goals are going to be in the game. Yeah.
And you can also use that sort of scene to establish, like, how good or bad they are at what they do. So, again, competency can be part of this, right?
Yeah. And then if we're talking about group or multiples, right, then we're talking about like how did the characters meet, right? Because you can sometimes just hand wave this and be like, you could be like the beginning of Dragonlance, right? Where they all just, well, seriously, like the beginning of Dragonlance,
they're great.
Right? They all start in the tavern.
Yeah.
And they all know each other.
Well,
and
they don't even start in the tavern. They start with all of the scenes of going to the tavern to meet each other.
Actually, they all start walking into the tavern.
Yeah.
Right. We don't see anything before. Like, we just kind of, I think we see a little bit before
because there's like, it doesn't like, oh my God, it's been so long. I feel like somebody runs into...
The Dragonlance people are like, they're like
dying.
Clawing at their phones.
I haven't read these books in like 15 years and I'm trying to reconstruct the first chapter, right?
Stop talking about Dragonlance, you two. You haven't read it in eons.
I distinctly remember that like we get a scene that has Flint and Tass in it before they get to the inn, and I think like Tanis stumbles across them and they're all walking that direction or something. Like, I don't know.
I don't remember.
I should just go reread this.
I remember
we keep referencing
I remember Fizban's like arranging the seats in the tavern, right? And he's like,
Tika's
it's a big like, it's a big night tonight. Like he's like, you don't know. He's like, it's a big night. What's that?
Oh, Fizban. Just little heart.
Right? Just
little heart. Okay.
So anyway, but you're right. But the point being,
yes,
to slow us back down. The point being is that in those cases, that story starts very close to the beginning of. It starts very close to the beginning of that story. We don't actually do any scenes about the past 5 years. We just see everybody like about to walk in. So that's a way of not doing a prelude, right? So then doing the prelude is like talking about like, cool, how do you two characters come to be friends? Or how does the group come together? How do you all get your superpowers? You know, if you're the Fantastic Four, you have kind of a group origin story. Like, oh, we took this rocket into space and we got bombarded with cosmic rays, and now we're superheroes.
Yeah. Can I tell a gaming story really quickly?
Always.
That applies to the origin story stuff and to some of the ones that we're going to talk about in a second. So, one of my favorite origin stories that we ever played out at my table was actually, it was my character's individual origin story, but it was before she was born. So it was her parents, but like what it did was it was how her parents met and got together, which ended up being like how it tied a bunch of the other characters in the group together by them getting together. And then they're gone and dead, but they left me behind and I'm left with the people that they brought together. Right. So like that was the story of the people on this ship. Like, right.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but like it was a bunch of us were tied together by this story. So like I was being raised by my uncle, who had, been there when my parents met and like tried to stop them from flying through the gate into the nothingness and, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, but that's like one of my favorite origin stories. And my character wasn't even in it, but it was definitely her origin story because it was how she came to be. But like we ended it with the whole ship, like with all the people on it, and my parents flew through the gate into the void. And then like 10 years later, it flew back out and it only had my uncle and me in it. And we don't know what happened in there, right? Like
right?
No one knows. And it was fantastic. So I like throwing that out there because that one I think was really fantastic, both because it ended up being an individual origin story. It ended up being a group origin story because it was why we were together and how we had that spaceship. And why the spaceship was named after my mom. And then on top of that, it was also our next point, which is foreshadowing, which is another way that you can use preludes, is to set up stuff that you're going to connect back to in the campaign. And for us in that particular story, we ended up then connecting back to all of these moments with my mom. Like she was famous, people knew her, and I was getting old enough to start looking like her. There was a lot of foreshadowing about the fact that we ended up going back through that gate. That was like, we went back through, we don't know what happened. That was where we ended the campaign. And also like we found out I wasn't actually my mom's child. I was actually a clone of my mom, right? Like, so we were foreshadowing that, like all of that stuff was really cool and very interesting and super neat. And my favorite thing about it is what ended up happening is that I learned a ton of stuff about my character that I did not plan and had no idea going in, right? I did not plan to be a clone. I didn't know anything about my mom except that she was dead. I didn't, have any of that background. So like I went into this being like, I don't know, I'm like upstart, flashy, teen, hotshot pilot kid, right? Like half based on what's her name, adorable from Firefly, Kaylee, and
sure.
and half just like Han Solo, right? Like that was me, like half Kaylee, half Han Solo, but like teen, and then like I just like it became this wild journey that led us into a lot of the story we ended up telling in the campaign about discovering that I was a clone and that my uncle knew that I didn't, like all of this stuff, right? Anyway. That was a great game. Sorry, sidetrack. Moving right along. So foreshadowing is another fantastic way to use preludes.
Yeah, I mean, so we can in the course of the prelude, we can start putting down hints of things to come in the main story.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's and we can do this while doing some of the other things that we've already talked about. We can have the prelude also foreshadow things. And we don't have to do it for every character. We can do it for one character, some characters. Like, I'm gonna after we get through this last one, let's just do this last one, and then I want to talk about a couple things before we get into the other bullet that we have there.
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to just add one more thing to foreshadowing, which
Sure.
is foreshadowing is another really cool way to use preludes / flashbacks in the middle of a campaign, because if you ever feel like you're not confident that you're bringing in all the drama or something like that to the storyline, like the fact that we played that prelude, and it didn't happen at the beginning of that particular game. It happened a couple sessions in, but it changed the course of how we considered the rest of the game because it recontextualized what was happening, right?
Yep, I'm gonna unpack a little bit of that.
Oh,
in a
okay,
second.
cool. Carry on.
So the last thing that a prelude can help do is it can help actually everyone practice the rules.
Yeah, if you
Right.
play the rules of the actual game.
And we'll talk about that in a second. But if you want to get a few warm-up rolls in, a simple combat, a couple skill checks, those kinds of things, a prelude is a great place to kind of put some of those in. And we'll talk about why. We'll talk about that that's not always necessary, but it is definitely an objective of having a prelude.
Yeah, it might be your primary objective if nobody's played this game before, to have a practice run, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now let me just say a thing about symmetrical and asymmetrical preludes.
Yes.
And then I want to talk about preludes versus flashbacks.
Sure.
Okay?
Yes.
So hold preludes versus flashbacks.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about symmetrical and asymmetrical preludes.
Okay.
So symmetrical preludes means that you have an idea for a prelude and everybody gets the same kind of prelude. Okay, so like
Yep.
everybody's gonna do their origin story.
Yeah.
Right. And we're gonna go around the table and we're gonna do everybody's origin story, and that's our prelude. And it's symmetrical, right? Meaning all players get the same general experience, even though it will be it'll be their experience. So maybe I want to do an origin story, plus I want to do some practice rules. The wizard, I'm going to make sure they cast a spell, and the fighter, I'm going to let them have a simple combat, and the thief, I'm going to have them pick a lock, right? It's contextually different, but it's symmetrical in that I'm giving everybody a little bit of the same thing.
Yes.
Asymmetrical preludes are that you can totally not do that, and you can actually decide what you want each character to have out of their prelude and just do that part.
Yeah.
Like, perhaps a character has a mysterious background and you don't want to do an origin story for them. You instead want to just do some foreshadowing and maybe some practice rules, or you want to do foreshadowing and let them do some role playing. But for some of the other players, you absolutely want to do how these two characters met.
Yes.
Those kinds of things. So you don't have to, it's not a one size fits all kind of thing. It is more work to do asymmetrical preludes, because you're going to have to kind of decide what each character gets out of their prelude and then write them up individually. Whereas if you are going to do symmetrical, they're all going to basically have the same structure, and you're just going to change the bits for the characters.
Right, so that it fits their niche.
Yeah, so that's symmetrical versus asymmetrical preludes. And then the other piece I want to talk about is flashbacks versus preludes. So there's room for both of these in a game. They're not mutually exclusive. You can totally have a prelude at the beginning of a game and still have flashbacks.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Or you could use either or neither, both, whatever. Right. So I'm trying really hard. Like, I think we try very hard to explain, like, there's no one way to do these things.
Yeah.
but take the pieces you like, I think, is our philosophy. The reason you do a prelude is often you are on-ramping into the game. So you don't want to just drop in media res, and sometimes you do, but for whatever reason you don't want to. That's been your decision as a GM. You're about to kick off this campaign, and you're like, I don't really want to in media res, and maybe that's because you need to warm up on the rules, and it's nice to have these preludes, which are lighter and like a little more controlled, where you can kind of ease into the rules. You might be doing it because you kind of want to flesh out the characters a bit more before you drop into the main story, that kind of thing. So think of a prelude as an on-ramp. The prelude is, you're doing the prelude because you are satisfying some needs that you and the group have before the action hits, right? And so that's a perfectly valid way to do it. The flashback is a tool for filling in details that have yet to come up, or like you said, adding new context to situations, right? And it's a great literary tool where we can drop right into the action. We can go up to a point, then flash back, play that flashback, which then changes our understanding of everything that we've just experienced up to the flashback.
Mm-hmm. And changes
and
the
then
context
proceed
going
through
forward.
the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another valid tool to use. And it winds up being like a prelude because all the things that you can do in a prelude are the kinds of things you can do with a flashback.
Yes.
We can flash back to how the wizard left his master.
Yep.
Like that's a thing we can flash back. And maybe it's, maybe we do it as the on-ramp into the story, or as a flashback. We see the wizard after the party has attacked this other wizard and defeated, some evil wizard, that our current wizard like runs over and rips out pages from the spell book.
Right. And then we flash back to why the heck he's doing that.
Right. Like, why is that so important? Right now it's time for a good flashback.
Yeah.
And with flashbacks, so with preludes, because you're doing it before the action starts, you kind of do all the preludes at once. With flashbacks, you can do flashbacks for individual characters all throughout the story. You don't have to do all the flashbacks at once. You can play for a bit and we can do Senda's flashback. Then we go play for a bit more and do Schmitty's flashback at a different time because it's going to add a different piece.
Yeah, or you can just do what we tend to do, which is we're in the middle of a campaign and someone can't make it tonight. I guess we're going to play a flashback.
Yeah, well, that's a great way to
great,
that's
right?
a great way to play without advancing the main storyline because you're missing players, but yet still have the opportunity to play and build upon things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about that separately, so I'm sorry because some of this might be a repeat of that episode. But anyway, moving right along. Shall we talk about...
Anyway, it's good.
Yeah, should we talk about tips?
General tips.
For player preludes.
Yes. So the first one is, I'm going to say, know your purpose, right? From the list that we provided above, when you're setting up your prelude, and again, make this interchangeable for flashback. I just don't want to say it over. I don't want to say both of them going forward. Know your purpose. What is the purpose for each character? What is the purpose of this prelude?
Yeah.
Why are we doing this?
Yep.
Cool. What's another tip?
Preludes are something, and this is easy because flashbacks happen, mid-campaign, but preludes are something that come after session 0 still, right? And the key there is that you still have sat down, created the expectations of your table, the table culture, and talked safety before you're playing these preludes, right? When we say prelude, we don't mean bypass all of that, play this, and then talk about the stuff later. No, you're still playing the game at the table. You still have to establish all of this stuff before you play the prelude. Just do it.
The safety part's the most important part,
yes.
Right? You don't want to just be like, well, we're going to start playing some preludes and then, we'll do our session 0 afterwards.
No.
Like that's do your session 0.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do your character creation in session 0 if you want to do your preludes before or during character creation. We'll talk about that in a second, but you got to go do the safety expectation and all of that.
You got to have communicated all the table important stuff, the most key among those things being safety. Yeah.
Yep. All right, cool. Next one is decide if you actually need to roll dice during your prelude. So I'm in the middle of reading iHunt, which is fantastic. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. And they have as actually a first session, they do what's called a pilot episode, which is essentially a prelude. And one of the rules in it is you actually don't roll dice during the pilot. You just say what happens.
Yeah.
With the idea that dice are fickle, mechanics are somewhat heavier, and what we're really trying to achieve in this prelude is to kind of understand how the players come together, how they have hunted something together, who they are, that kind of thing. And so you don't roll dice, you just talk it out.
And to establish competency. Just calling that one back. Yeah, right?
It's pretty easy to be competent if you don't have to roll the dice.
Yeah. I mean, I will say from my perspective, most of the flashbacks that we've played, almost all of them, I would say, have been played in When Rachel's Yes, which you can now get in Love and Resistance. So if I've been talking about it for ages and you're still going, Senda, where can I find this game you keep talking about? It's in Love and Resistance, and the problem is that we took the scene structure and bent it into anything we wanted to. At the table, so it's not exactly as written, but we played pretty much all of our flashbacks, and yes is essentially a scene structure. It does not have any dice rolls.
Yeah.
Right. So it is something where we can specifically basically group we can basically group Tori-style our way through like whatever that flashback is, and we have complete control over it because we're not at the whims of the dice in those situations.
Yeah, and just as a note here, right? So Senda keeps talking about this using Yes for flashbacks. That's implying that Senda's using a completely different game system to play the flashback from the Prelude, and
Correct.
That's kind of the same way of using something like Microscope to build out the structure of your campaign world before you actually start the campaign. Now, you can do that. You can go to another system and do your Prelude, or you can do your Prelude or flashback in the system that you're playing.
Yeah, I've
both
done,
are valid.
I've done both. I have also played Microscope to like jump from our the children in the mysteries with the aliens.
Well, I think you might mean Tales from the Loop,
you.
but it's hard to...
We were trying to jump from Tales from the Loop to Things from the Flood, so we did a Microscope in between to see what happened during the intervening 10 years, right? So it was like our prelude to the next campaign of those characters was that we sat down and did that timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to note that as well, right? So it's totally valid to use another system, or it's
or
completely
not.
fine to use the system.
Whatever makes the most sense, and it depends on, again, knowing what you're going for from doing the Prelude, because if what you're going for is to practice the rules, you don't want to do it in a different system,
Correct.
Obviously.
Again, know your purpose.
Know your purpose. Sorry. Yep. Just going back to this stuff. Cool.
Next one?
Yeah, the next one is... So, and this is just a thing that's always true when it's short and sweet, right? Preludes need to be simple plots. Even if they can have multiple objectives, but this should be something that you can play in anywhere from like a scene to a one-shot, but it probably isn't longer than that. Because if it's longer than that, this is really its own campaign. It's no longer... You've entered like a full story arc or something. Right, which is a kind of a different beast. Like you could absolutely have a flashback or something that was, an entire arc in and of itself, but that accomplishes a very different purpose than what we're actually talking about here. Exactly. Yeah. Another tip in this one also comes from iHunt, right? Your prelude can occur before you complete character gen. Yeah. So actually in IHOP good. IHOP all pancakes. iHunt. Well, I wonder how many times I'll do that in the future. You're going to be, I'm totally running IHOP tonight. And everybody will be like, oh my God, I'm running the pancake campaign. Oh, I could go for some pancakes right now. I have so many pancakes in my refrigerator. Anyway, keep going. Anyway, all right. So in iHunt, and this is actually true for Fate, right? So Fate in general, because iHunt is a Fate game, Fate in general allows this, which is you don't actually have to pick all your skills and your aspects and stunts before you start playing the game. You can fill them in on the fly. So part of what you do with the pilot episode is that you use the pilot episode to help you figure out what some of those choices are. Yep. So like as you're playing, you're like, oh, cool, I think I'm going to hack that. And then you're like, oh, you know what? I think I'll just take a +2 and hack. Right. Maybe I should have that skill. Maybe I should have that skill, right? So you can do that in your own prelude. Is like you don't actually have you can start character gen but not finish it and then do the prelude. And then during as you play, you can have players figure out oh, you know what? Probably be helpful if I had a couple of points in rope use. I mean, I myself can never have enough points in rope use, but that's just me. Anyway, what's our next tip? You can also allow people to make changes or do fixes and tweaks after the prelude or the flashback, right? I will say specifically in this case, or the flashback, right? Because flashback recontextualizes some stuff. People may realize in context of the flashback that they have actually mechanically not supported what happened in the flashback. And the same thing for the prelude. They may build their character if you build them all the way up before the prelude, and then you play the prelude and they're like, yikes, that didn't quite do what I expected it to do based on the story. Like, let people have a little tweaky space right in there, because it's a reasonable time to let them just make that all match up.
I myself, personally, when I'm running a campaign, allow that to happen in the first 4 sessions of the campaign.
Yeah, it's good.
I actually will allow players to make minor changes to their characters within the first 4 episodes of the campaign, because what did you know at the point you made your character?
Yeah, like,
right?
you didn't know all the rules, and you didn't know how the thing that you wrote down was going to actually play, and then you're like, wait, that doesn't match up with me at all. Yeah.
So it's good. I always allow people within the first 4 episodes, like, look, if you got to change a thing, a skill, a stat, whatever, even if you want to make wholesale changes, like you want to change your character class, like whatever, like in the first 4 sessions, I don't hold continuity too tightly. And because, again, it's that, drive it before you buy it kind of thing.
Yep.
Okay. Another one is if you're going to do individual preludes, right? So you're not going to do group or origin stories or group, pair off people or whatever, but you're going to do a prelude with each character before, you kick into the campaign. Then going hand in hand with simple plots, you're going to have to manage the table with kind of an aggressive spotlight. And what I mean by that is, if you've got 5 people at the table and you've got 5 separate origin stories, 1, you got to get through all of them. So that's why you want to make them fairly simple. But 2, 4 people are not having an origin story while one of them is. Now, you could pull some people in for NPCs and stuff. That's also fun. But they're still not having their origin story.
Yeah.
So you're going to want to get that spotlight cooking around the table, right? You want to, like, open up and, like, start talking with Senda. Then, bam, I'm cutting over to Schmitty. Then I'm cutting over to Tony. I'm coming back to Senda, like, around, just moving the spotlight around the table so that by the end of your session, you've gotten through everybody's prelude.
Yeah, because
but you have not gone sequentially through everyone's prelude.
Yeah, because you're essentially managing a split party is what you're doing. You have to treat it like that. And that's definitely a situation in which, like, not everybody is going to get a whole one shot while everyone else sits and stares about their backstory, right? Now,
Correct.
The part of the reason that I love using the game, for flashbacks and preludes kind of stuff is because everybody plays and it's GM-less. So everybody is constantly involved, and you are actually not allowed to play the same character twice in a row in the official rules. And so everybody's constantly, like, passing around characters and playing things and being involved. And the exception that we make to those rules is if we're playing the flashback for a specific character, letting that person play that character since it's theirs. But yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So basically, but that's, again, if you're using different, if you jump out of your system mechanically to do a flashback in a different system.
Sure. Last tip is your prelude may, or may not connect to the main plot.
Right.
So you can have your prelude be completely independent of the main plot. That is, we just play the prelude, and then, after the preludes are all played, then we jump into the main plot. It has nothing to do with anyone's prelude. Or we can have the preludes leading up to the main story. Or if we're doing this asymmetrically, somebody in the group, their prelude leads to the main story and everyone else just gets kind of pulled in for other reasons. So don't feel like your prelude has to on-ramp you directly into your first story. Your prelude can just be what it is. And again, that's going to go back to understanding what your goal is with the prelude, and also the reason why we put foreshadowing as one of the options for preludes, because if you are going to connect it to your main story, then foreshadowing is one of the reasons you have it.
Right. That's your purpose.
Coolio. Good. Let's wrap this up. I think that's a good number of tips. We talked about reasons why you would do preludes. We talked about symmetrical and asymmetrical preludes versus flashbacks, and tips for running good preludes. I feel like that's a pretty jam-packed...
I feel like we got a lot in there.
Yeah, I feel like we got a lot in there in a decent amount of time. So in order for us to get to the closing, we have to get through talking about one of the other shows on the Misdirected Mark Network. I see which one you have listed. Would you please tell me a little bit about the Gnomecast?
Yes, indeed. On the Gnomecast, a bunch of gnomes get together and talk about cool gaming stuff, and also frequently articles that we've, written and posted, and more in-depth, thoughts about those things, sharing that stuff with each other and having more voices talk about that stuff. And hopefully we do a good enough job that we don't get tossed into the stew pot, where apparently there's a trapdoor that Phil just leaves by, but I get boiled.
Well, yeah, but I, was there when the pot was first put on the fire, so...
Because you're old.
I was born into it.
I was born into the stew pot.
I was there when the stew pot was assembled. I was there when the ingredients were being chopped up.
Wow.
I'm old.
You're old.
Somewhere I have the email message where I got my initial invite to Gnome Stew before it was Gnome Stew. Anyway... Senda, where do people find us on the internet?
Special. You can find us on Twitter at Pandas Talk Games, and you can find us in the Misdirected Mark forums, which is forums.misdirectedmark.com. And you can drop us an email if you prefer, panda@misdirectedmark.com, or you could be super snazzy and find us on the Tiki Talkies. Where I actually use my Twitter handle, but I don't know if Phil has fixed his yet. So, be magic and see if you can find him, because it'll be a challenge.
Surprise, it's my name.
It's a treasure hunt. See if you can find.
Surprise, look for my name.
Anyway, and once they find us in one of those places, what can they do with that information?
Yes, much like AD and David, you can ask us a question, leave us a topic, pick something for us to postulate upon. We love it. We love it. We love it. We love it. We love hanging out and chatting with each other, but we love it more when the thing that we do on the mics is going to be helpful for other people who are running games. That is what we're here for, is to help you make your games more enjoyable for you and your players. So grab whatever topic or question you have, toss it our way, and we will, at our whim. So I got to be honest about this, right? We have a list of them. Senda throws them out in front of me, and I kind of just, whichever one jumps out at me that day is the one that we prep for the show. So please don't feel bad if your topic hasn't come up yet. It's not that we don't love you, because we love all of you. But it literally is whatever spark of creativity lands on a topic, that's the one we wind up prepping for the show. And there's no rhyme or reason to that.
Yes, true.
There's none whatsoever. I have given it thought over the almost 5 years we've been doing this, but it is literally just a whim. It's whatever I look at and I'm like, oh yeah, that'd be a good topic to do today. That's how we pick them. So don't feel bad about that. If you like what we do here or elsewhere on the Misdirected Mark Network, please consider supporting our Patreon campaign. You can go to patreon.com/MMP. Patrons of the show get access to our Slack room for life. That is basically our bunker that we've been hanging out in during these pandemic times. We have all sorts of rooms for topics. So we have a general area where we all just kind of chit chat about our days. We have channels dedicated to role playing. We have recipes. You can see all the great food that people make. You can, if you thought that PK Sullivan was just a talented game designer, you don't even know. You don't even know what this guy's cooking.
Yeah.
PK is a talented game designer and
a magic
pretty
chef.
Awesome looking cook. I would love to play in a campaign that involved going to PK's house for food. That would be That would very much be, I don't know which one I would be more excited for, playing the game or, whatever PK cooked up. Anyway, there's a recipe section. There are more serious sections. We have a section where we've, shared information, feelings, and hardships about COVID and politics and all those things. The point is, it's a great place to come and chat with other people who are also super into the Misdirected Mark ecosystem. And, just good friends and a great place to spend time together. Can also then come join us for our Misdirected Mark luncheons on Fridays, which hopefully I'll get to start attending in full after I get my one project done and I can get this meeting that's been on my schedule for the last couple of weeks off.
Yes.
Yeah, you can do all those things. There are other things that we have done in the past. I'll admit we don't do as many of them right now in the future in terms of giveaways and things like that because we just haven't been making as many new things. But as a patron, you also get access to the Bamboo Lounge, which is the 15 minutes of nonsense that we come up with at the end of the episode. And the after show, which is literally whatever is still stuck on our mind when we hit the end of Misdirected Mark. But you get those as well.
Yes. Sorry, yes. Bamboo Lounge.
Yeah. I already talked about the Bamboo Lounge.
I know.
I did it first.
I got it backwards, and then I went, wait, we're not Misdirected Mark. And then I was like, yes, good. I'm on the mics, but I still messed it up. Carry on.
Anyway, if you're a... your patronage goes a long way to make all of this possible, and we appreciate it greatly. If you are already patroning the show, thank you very much. We appreciate it greatly. And if you're unable to patron the show, that is totally fine. We understand. There is still one more thing you can do that helps us immensely. We are always looking to reach more people because we are pretty convinced that if you listen to us, you will love us. That was last year's tagline. We're sticking with it.
Are we not going? There's a new one. We wrote it down. Do you remember?
No, but I like both.
I mean, yeah, both of them are good.
But anyway, point being is that we need help getting people to hear the show. We already assume that you've already told all your friends and family about listening to us and that some of them probably, took you up on your advice. So thank you. But also we need strangers to find us. And there is one surefire way to get strangers to find this podcast. And that is?
You can leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or the podcatcher of your choice. Every new review we get really does actually help new people find the show because it does things to the algorithms in fancy, magical, mysterious ways that probably there are people out there who truly understand that, but most of us who actually podcast do not because they don't share that information. We just know that it helps lots. So it'd be great if you would leave us a review. We would much appreciate it. They make us feel warm and fuzzy inside. And then you can use our new slogan, which is your games, more, better, more fun. M-O-A-R.
More, better, more fun.
Because we take ourselves so seriously around here.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Cool. Say, Senda, for your next... Say, Senda, for your Star Trek game that's coming up in the future where you play a Trill, what kind of prelude would you like to have?
Oh, boy. What a question. Show me what you got. Show me what you got. Hey, show me what you got. Show me what you got. Show me what you got. Hey, show me what you got. Show me what you got. This show is a joint production of She's a Super Geek and Misdirected Mark Productions, the media arm of Encoded Designs. Show me what you got, eh? Show me what you got. Show me what you got, eh? Show me what you got. Show me what you got, eh? Show me what you got. Show me what you got, eh? Bloopy.
I think I might have been a half a second ahead of you, but I'm sure you'll be able to line it up.
Yeah, actually, that means that you probably will line up right up with me because, usually you hear the fact I click when I say clicky, and you click when you hear me say clicky, which through Zoom is usually about half a second after I actually
I think I anticipated the clicky this time, so I just kind of went for it.
Yeah, it's all good.
I think you'll figure it out.
It'll be fine.
Alrighty. Welcome. We're not going to belabor the point. We have a Bamboo Lounge to do at the end of this, so take out a pen.
Yes.
Get ready to mark your spot.
I'm prepared. I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm going to draw a box for it.
And in the intro, And in the intro, I'm going to be the host who wants to explore his backstory.
Oh.
And you should be one of the other preludes.
Oh.
Actually, I'll be the host that does foreshadowing. You can be the host that explores their backstory.
Thank you. That's usually what I'm doing.
I know. Okay.
Wow, look at us. We planned it out.
Well, that's because for the first time I actually thought of it before we started.
Okay.
Normally I don't bother.
Okay.
Just like the workshop.
I'm in shock.
The workshop has no lyrics until the music starts.
I know. Till you say it.
Okay. Are you ready?
Workshop.
Don't suck.
I love bumps. Don't suck. Okay.
Do.